Just wanted to also thank again our event sponsors. We actually had another sponsor pony up while we were in the middle of our conference. So I'd like to thank Justin Pelletier, who joins Joseph Cohen as a gold sponsor. Our silver sponsor, me. Bronze sponsors Richard Bell, Kerry Bittner, Justin Carmen, Jim Dayton, Angela Einwalker, Millie Gordell, and Len Morlock. And also sponsor organizations Divide New York Caucus and the Mises Caucus. So thank you all for supporting our event today. Tasha Cohen is a resident of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Her activist passion is in helping the less fortunate. On the campaign trail and whenever she travels, she visits a local food kitchen, animal shelter, or meets with homeless people in that community to give back and show them that they matter. Libertarians show that we care by taking human action to help those in need with kindness, care, and empathy. Tasha invites you to join her in demonstrating compassion through action. She's also married to Spike Cohen, who is our next speaker. Without further ado, I give you Mr. Spike Cohen. Mr. Tasha Cohen, thank you.
It's great when you are the keynote speaker and you get surprised by your own introduction. That was fun. Let me put my phone on top. Like, I literally didn't know I was about to be called up, so I knew it was coming, but I didn't know that was how it was going to happen. First of all, before I start, I just want to thank everyone that's been involved in putting this together. Libertarian Party of New York. I know there are countless names that were involved in this. So give yourselves a round of applause, everyone that was involved in putting this together. It's at these kind of events that we do the networking that we need to do to be able to grow this movement. It's also where we go and remember that we're human beings that are talking to each other, and hopefully continue to remember that when we talk to each other on social media. So hopefully that continues on. I have to give a very, very special shout out to Tom Pinkasoff, who has been, yes, always clap for Tom. Tom has been our, I guess, runner / assistant this whole week that we've been here, and it is his goal to make me not leave and to remain in New York and become a resident of New York. And he's doing this in the best possible, the only shot he has, and that's by filling me with smoked fish every day. I have eaten more gravlax in the last 3 days than possibly my entire life. Now that might keep me here because I might die of hypertension. So if you would like me to remain here for however many remaining days I have, then round of applause to Tom for making sure that happened. So folks, I'm actually not one for long speeches, famous final words. I would prefer to answer your questions. So I'm going to talk very briefly, and then I will be up here until I can no longer stand or they tell me to stop, and answer any questions y'all have, because I think that's actually way more important than anything I have to say. But here's what I do want to say. When I first started giving speeches this year, going around to conventions and summits and conferences and various other libertarian get-togethers, it was very important to me to talk about what I learned last year during the campaign. And I would like to thank all of you for that great honor. For those of you who did vote for me to be your vice presidential nominee, you bestowed on me what is the second greatest honor in my life. The greatest honor, of course, is when my aforementioned wife said yes to me twice. The first time, when I asked her if she would marry me, and then the second time, when the rabbi asked her if she really meant it. But I do want to thank you if you did vote for me to be your nominee. Thank you very much. It means everything to me. If you did not vote for me to be your nominee, I'm very sorry. I'm trying my best. But we worked very hard. Joe and I worked very hard. We went across the country spreading the message of liberty, doing countless events at the most difficult time possible. I'd say close to a third of the events I did were entirely illegal because the states weren't giving out permits in those states. The offices were closed. And so we'd show up and do it anyway because we have a protected right to free speech. And as a libertarian, I will say I am disappointed that I never got arrested, but it was not from lack of trying. I mean, when you walk up to a police officer and they say, you can't be here, and I say, I'm going to be here, here's my bullhorn, I'm going to start speaking, you have to arrest me if you want me to stop, and they don't arrest you, I feel like I did everything I could. I feel like I did everything that I could. They didn't even arrest the other people there, like they were on their best behavior, and I'm like, why? So, like I'm trying to get on the news. So, we went around and we worked very hard, and I will tell you that I was as disappointed as anyone when I saw the results that we had. And frankly, there was plenty of silver linings there, right? We had nearly 50% growth of the Libertarian Party last year, incredible number. Double-digit growth in the number of registered libertarians across the country. We did get close to 100 elected libertarians in last election, which was, by the way, just blown out in this last election we just had a few days ago. Over 150 elected across the country, over 100 just in Pennsylvania. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. And another side note there, I'll circle back to that shortly. We worked very hard, and there were some glimmers, some good silver linings, like the number of registered libertarians, the number of new elected libertarians, the growth in the Libertarian Party, and the fact that, yes, we got the second highest number of votes, and more importantly, we got the highest number of votes that anyone ever got as a libertarian during a presidential re-election campaign. There was actually an incumbent on the ballot. We got 1%. We scored the margin of error. It was very disappointing to me. And the next day, when I woke up, and I was fully expecting people to tell me how terrible I was, instead, I was greeted with my phone exploding with notifications, text messages, emails, Facebook messages, Twitter messages, phone calls, from people congratulating me. And I said, well, hey, thanks. Why are you congratulating me? And they said, oh, and all the stuff I just said, all the silver linings. And I said, no, that's good. Why are you congratulating me? Like, yes, these are good things that we can take away from it, but why aren't we talking about where we failed and how we can do better in the future? And I realized something. And this is what I used to be very heavy on in my speeches earlier this year. 50 years ago, this party was started by a small group of people in Luke Zell's living room in Colorado to basically be a protest movement. They ran people for president that they knew didn't have a shot in hell of winning. They weren't even really trying to win. They weren't even on enough ballots to win. They'd get thousands of votes for president, but they knew they weren't going to win. It was a protest movement that has now turned into the third largest political party and the fastest growing political party in the country. But it started in the roots of, we know we aren't going to win. And I think what started as a healthy acknowledgement that they weren't going to win eventually turned into a coping mechanism for why they weren't winning, and has now turned into what I call a culture of losing. Of simply having these pie-in-the-sky ideas of what we'd like to do if we were to ever actually get into office, but deep down believing we're not ever actually going to get into office, and so not actually creating a plan to get into office, and instead focusing on blaming each other for why we don't get into office. Now, that was the beginning of the year. Since then, a few things have happened. Number one, in the special election that we had back in April, the Libertarian Party won 57% of the races that they targeted. Now, that's okay, you can clap that. By the way, if at any point during my speech you feel the need to applaud, do not let the fact that I'm talking stop you, okay? If at any point you want to cheer and shout or hoot and holler, you're the best, Mike. You don't have to say it, whatever you want to say. Thank you. You don't have to. Except for that. No, if you anything you feel, I'm here for you. Don't let the fact that I will stop and let you applaud what I'm saying. No. So we have had some really great things happen. We had that election happen. We had this most recent election happen where we had a record-breaking number of wins. And also, I've been across the country, and I would show up and I'd say, guys, we need to run local. We need to not just run the paper candidates. We need to be winning in local races. We need to be getting involved in our local communities. We need to be building coalitions. We need to build a culture of winning. And almost every single state I've been to was like, yeah, no, we're way ahead of you. We're doing that. That's what we're doing. Here are our city council candidates. Here are our local town board candidates. Here are our auditor candidates. Here are the different groups that we're building coalitions with. Here's all the stuff we're doing that is literally what you said that we should do. So now what I'm doing is talking about what I still think is missing. And I think that is, there are people in this movement who are still looking for their space. And it might not be within the Libertarian Party, at least not yet. And the reason for that is multifold, and I can spend an hour talking about that, and I won't. But the bottom line is there is a gap there for people who are looking to have effective activism that they can do for libertarianism that is adjacent to the Libertarian Party and that synergizes and works with the goals of the Libertarian Party and runs candidates as libertarians. And so that's why I'm starting an organization later towards the end of this year. We're putting the final touches on it called You Are the Power. And what You Are the Power is going to be is if you want to be an activist, you join You Are the Power. All the tools are going to be there for you to be an effective activist. The ABCs of activism, how to get involved in your community, how to build coalitions, a directory of other like-minded groups, pro-firearms groups, anti-lockdown groups, anti-mandate groups, anti-police brutality groups, and so forth, that we can work with to do that. It's going to provide the tools for you to be able to be an effective advocate, and it's going to provide the network to be able to signal boost what you're doing so that the more effective it becomes, the more people that can find out about it. Again, very preliminary stuff. There will be a lot more coming out soon, but be on the lookout for that. You Are the Power. That's going to be what we're doing especially coming into next year. And the goal is to get 1,000 libertarians elected in the midterm elections. And I know that number sounds very pie in the sky. Pennsylvania got 120. That's one state. Now, Pennsylvania also has a lot of uncontested and lightly contested elections, but there are other bigger states that are similar. California, Illinois, New York, South Carolina. There's a few states where we could be doing this. 1,000 is not an unreasonable number. We just have to do the work to do it. And I will be working here and across the country with people who have that goal. Because long before anyone is going to trust us in the White House, or for that matter in Congress or the governor's mansion, they need to see where our ideas work, how they work, what libertarian governance looks like, where it matters most, in their communities, where they live. In their backyards. If they see that it works, where it matters most. This is the beauty of it. We focus a lot on the federal stuff, right? That's the big stuff, the wars, the Fed, the mandates, and all this stuff. But you're more likely to be affected by what some petty tyrant in your backyard passed on a day-to-day basis than what Joe Biden or Donald Trump did. That's just the simple fact of it. That's where we can win right now. So let's show people what it looks like. Let's acutely affect people's day-to-day lives by setting them free and letting them see how much better their lives are as a result. And then from there we can work our way to those larger races, to those higher races. But in the meantime, let's get to work where we are the most effective. So again, you're already doing that, so you're already ahead of me. But the thing is, and I don't need to tell you this, I live in South Carolina, you live in New York, so I don't need to tell you this. The stakes are higher than they've ever been, and they're only going to get higher. I don't do the most important election of our times thing, because that's usually a ruse to get you to vote for something that you would never support. But the reality is, every single day, government gets worse. Here in New York, here in your local communities, nationwide, and in other countries, it just gets worse, because no one's stopping them. And until they are stopped, they're going to keep getting worse. Look at Australia. We can talk about Cuba, what they just did to the protesters there, but we expected that. Cuba's a communist dictatorship. That was unfortunately not surprising, what they did to the protesters, rounding them up and killing them afterwards. But look at Australia. A lot of us thought Australia was freer than us in some ways. Look what happened in the matter of a year and a half. We've probably all seen the videos of old women being beaten up by police officers for not wearing a mask outside. Who thinks that wouldn't eventually make its way here? Good, because it will. Look at Canada. We're attached to them. We can drive, well, we used to be able to drive there. Look at what has happened to that country in an incredibly short period of time. Why? Because the people there are tolerating it. What is the one thing that is holding back our gigantic, warmongering, murderous, thieving, superstate government? It ain't the fact that we have guns. I know a lot of people think that. It's because we got guns. The American people, if you combine all the private gun owners, we make up the largest military. That's not why. Because half of those people are cheering on their oppressors. It's that it's the what little bit of resistance we have to it. And it doesn't take a lot of it. It doesn't take 50% of the population resisting it. Government enforcers make up less than 1% of the population. Just logistically, if 1, 2, or 3% of the population simply refuses to comply with something, it becomes effectively impossible for them to be able to effectively enforce it. They try, and they get brutal when they try, because they're trying to make an example, but they can't really stop it. And what happens is over time, more and more people look and go, well, if they don't have to do it, why do I have to do it? And 3% becomes 5%, becomes 10%, becomes 20%, and then it either goes away entirely, they actually repeal it, or they just stop enforcing it. Think of all the laws that are on the books right now that they don't even bother enforcing, because we never tolerate it. We have to encourage a mindset of non-compliance and resistance, not for the sake of it, not just because they said to do it, we're not going to do it, but on the things that are burdensome and onerous and make no sense. Everyone has to choose what their hill is. I've chosen quite a few hills this year that I'm going to fight on, and I hope that you found that you're finding yours. As we do that, we as libertarians can grow our movement so that eventually we don't have to talk about resisting the totalitarian state. We can talk about how we're dismantling it. And it starts in our communities, and I'm very grateful to see all the work that you are doing. So with that, with my what turned into a longer speech than I probably anticipated, I would be, how long was that? Not too bad. That wasn't too bad. So with that, until they tell me to stop talking, I would be happy to answer any questions y'all have. Do not be shy, ask me your questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Are you the sole creator of your Twitter account, or do you have a team to help you?
And what's your name?
My name's Greg.
Great. So I have a social media team. What they largely do is they will bring items to me because it's impossible for me to keep track of every single thing that's going on Earth.
It's amazing how much content.
That's because I have people that hand me stuff and say, hey, check this out. I would say 99% of the tweets are me. At this point, during the campaign, it was a lower percentage because I just didn't have time. But now it's people, it's largely either me finding something or someone bringing something to my attention. I look into it, I come up with what I want to say about it, and then I put it out there. Every once in a while, some of the longer form stuff will be me working with someone else, like deep diving into something. So then maybe that's about half to 2/3 me, but overall it's about 99% me. Twitter, Facebook, all of it, yeah. I'm on the internet a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Is that the one question? Do I run in?
Yes. Somebody else. I'm Deborah Altman. Hi, everyone. The biggest issue I think that everyone, is going to face nationally and in every state and in every county and in every backyard is our children. I do see a lot of libertarians, a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats. Everyone is talking about the kids. What about the kids? Especially when it comes to the mandate, whether you're pro or anti or in between or unsure, they're coming for children.
Yeah.
They know that children are the weak spot, and what everyone will comply to is to go after what you're trying to protect.
Right.
So parents, I think, are the next front, and I just wanted to know, what do you feel? What would you tell a parent? What would you tell a person who is feeling like the government is coming after them, and they have to comply for the sake of their children? How will you encourage them to comply?
Well, thank you, Deborah. The first thing that I always say to anyone when they come to me and say, should I comply with this, is I can't make that decision for you. First, and just on an individual basis. I can say the importance of non-compliance. I can say how important it is for as many of us not to comply as possible. But when someone comes to me and says, you know, if I don't comply with this vaccine mandate, and this is not hypothetical, I've had people come to me for this. If I don't comply with this vaccine mandate, I'm going to lose my job. I have a chronic health issue. I'm going to lose my health insurance. My children, I have a neurodivergent child who needs, early intervention assistance or whatever it's called, special education, and that's funded from my health insurance. If I lose this, my family's going to suffer. What do? And I say, I can't make that decision for you. Like, it's easy for me to stand here on my high horse and go, you should definitely not comply with the tyrants. Like, everyone has to make that choice. Broadly speaking, what I will say is that if you comply for your children now, your children will have to comply for theirs later to far worse things. That isn't me shaming you if someone chooses to comply on a specific thing. I comply with income taxes. Hear that? I comply with income taxes. I comply with all NSA-related mandates. I comply. By the way, I wish, if I am being monitored, I wish my monitors well. I hope their families are doing well, and I hope that they choose a more ethical line of work. But in the meantime, I would like them to know I definitely don't own any guns. There are many things that we comply with, and it's actually just become old hat, like income tax stuff and speed limits, seatbelts, things like that. There are things that a lot of us comply with, and it's something that we feel comfortable with, and it's so old hat now that who isn't complying with it and so forth. So that's part of the problem, is that you have this sediment of compliance that then people can point at and say, yeah, but you comply with this, which is why it has to be a personal choice. Broadly speaking, the things you comply with now, either because you hope they're temporary or because you just don't want your children to get hurt, become that next layer of sediment of things that are just status quo that you comply with. So it's something to think about. I don't have children, so it would be very easy for me to tell you, well, but kids are, wouldn't you rather your kids be free than safe? I don't have kids. Those are your kids. You have to make that choice on an individual basis. Broadly speaking, the more you comply now, the more your children are going to have to deal with in the future. That's just the simple reality of it.
Can I offer you a suggestion?
Sure.
Instead of saying you can't comply, then find a compromise. That's what I've been telling you. You don't want to comply, but find a compromise around your lifestyle right now, the culture that you're in right now. The way that the government is telling you have to live is your barrier. Find a way to live differently.
Yes.
Find a way to compromise around the way that they tell you to live. That's how I do it. And so you don't need the SUV and the 5 vacations and the 6-week job and the 12 whatever it is that they're telling you, the restaurants, going out, whatever life that they say equals happiness, find your own happiness.
Yeah.
Find another way to compromise so your children actually come first and everything else comes second.
Well, that's right, and that's what happens with comfort, right? Absolutely. That's part of keeping us fat and happy, right? Like, the more comfortable we are, the more that they don't even have to threaten us with a stick. They could just say, how would you like your comfort taken from you? Oh, no, not that. So that's true as well. Any other questions?
Spike.
Yes.
My name's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Spike. I think one of the things we talk about a lot is how you speak to people, everyone is a libertarian, they just don't know it yet. And you have a conversation with them and you say, okay, yeah, don't you want the government to stay in your life, don't you? And they, yeah.
Yes.
I find the challenge always comes with saying, all right, now you have to be okay with that happening for somebody else. And I think that's a big roadblock for a lot of people. Because, yeah, sure, I want the government to stay off my lawn, but I don't like my neighbor's lawn.
Yes.
How do you communicate that? And how do you make that more palatable for people?
Jeff, so the two of the biggest slogans that are out there in the mainstream political world are "my body, my choice" and "don't tread on me." And those are both inherently anti-authoritarian, kind of. They are both saying the government has no business telling me what to do. But we often see that the people who are saying "my body, my choice," many of them, not all of them, many of them are turning around and going, yeah, but you definitely don't have a choice when it comes to masks or vaccines. Now, that's not your choice. And for that matter, a lot of them would say that you don't have a choice when it comes to unhealthy foods or smoking or drinking. I mean, there are things that suddenly it isn't, it's my body, my choice, but definitely not your choice to make with your body. And I don't have to tell you that very often when people are saying, don't tread on me, they're saying, tread on them instead. Which is why I like our term, don't tread on anyone. And by the way, that's not what... And by the way, don't tread on me was originally supposed to be don't tread on me, meaning us. Me was the embodiment of the people, but it has very much turned into stay away from me and go bother that person over there that I don't like or I'm scared of or I hate or I think is going to take my job or whatever. So the important thing is that I think, first of all, I don't believe everyone's a libertarian and doesn't know it yet. There are some like just straight up authoritarians out there.
Sure.
That's just a fact. There are many people, everyone has a thing that they don't think government should be telling them or anyone else to do. Or anyone else, not just them. And I think often we need to focus on that, and we need to make common ground with people on that. Because rather than me try to convince someone of the entire holistic philosophical underpinnings of libertarianism, why not instead find someone who I already agree with 100% on this thing, whatever that is, ending the mask mandates in schools and letting the kids decide for themselves, or the parents decide for the kids themselves, or ending the wars, or fighting for criminal justice reform, or fighting against the Fed. I mean, there are plenty of anti-Fed authoritarians out there. I was shocked as much as I remember to say it now to discover that. People that are in favor of gun rights. All of these things, we already agree on that with them, not just that the government should be telling them what to do, but anyone else what to do on that as well. And if we can, if nothing else, we can work with them on that thing. And there's a good chance, because our ideas are better than anyone else's. That's why we're here, because we're right. Let me take a step back. We know very often that our likelihood of winning is very low. We aren't here because we think we have the best shot at winning. We're here because we know everyone else is wrong. Okay? So, since we know that, if we already have better ideas for left-leaning voters than anything the Democrats pretend to tell them, and if we have better ideas for Republican voters, for right-leaning voters than anything that the Republicans pretend to tell them, then why the hell are we arguing with them? Why would we not go where they are, meet them where they are, work with them on things we already agree with them on? If nothing else, we at least get a force multiplication by working with much larger groups of people on goals we're trying to achieve. And then when they hear our better ideas, we might actually pull them over a little bit more. Why not do that? So I think maybe what you were looking for is the strategy of how to disabuse them of that. That comes with knocking down people's cognitive defenses. So you might be able to have a productive conversation about that with someone that you know, a loved one, a friend, a work colleague, something like that. But that person out there, well, that's Cody, but some random person out there, that isn't part of what we're doing, and you just walk up to them, or someone on the internet, like the worst place to try to change minds and hearts, where we spend so much of our time trying to do that. Join and talking with them about these ideas. Their cognitive defenses are like Hadrian's Wall. They're as high up as can be, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to take that down. The way you take down people's cognitive defenses is showing them that you're a good actor. And the best way to show them that you're a good actor is work with them on something you already agree with them on. And be successful in it. And be the hardest worker in it. And then when you talk to them about that thing that they disagree with you on, whether it's masks, guns, healthcare, immigration, education, whatever it is, now they at least already know that you're a good person. You're someone to work with. You're not, just some disingenuous person trying to sell them your ideas. And from there, you can actually have a more fruitful conversation. But it's less about the rhetorical tactics, the Socratic method, or whatever. That's helpful, but it's actually more important to knock down the defenses so you're not having to go through all that in the first place. And in the meantime, worst case scenario, you at least work with them on something that you already agree on. So even if they walk away and go, well, I still think you're an idiot about all these things, but I'm glad we were able to stop this gun control act, or to end these mask mandates, or fight against this, or fight against that, or fight in favor of this. If nothing else, you had a force multiplier in that. So hopefully that helps. Amen.
Craig, I just wanted to ask you, you had mentioned about how few government enforcers there are, and you're right, and that's why government's been using these giant companies that have more or less relations with them. So, when Twitter throws off somebody, censors some particular phrase or thing, or when, massive companies say you have to get vaccinated or we're going to fire you,
Yep.
when that's coming from the corporate level and
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm glad that my response to that is talk to Joe Biden and Jen Psaki. They said straight up that they're making social media companies censor you when it comes to certain things. And for that matter, look up the Atlantic Council, which has existed since 2015. Remember back when you could go on Twitter and say pretty much anything you wanted? Pretty much prior to 2015? I mean, there were literal Nazis on there saying some terrible stuff that, honestly, when I heard that, that they were stopping Nazi content, I'm like, yeah, you know what, I probably wouldn't want Nazis on my platform either. But what originally started as we're going to kick out Nazis, and this is why we are free speech absolutists, what started as we're going to kick off Nazis turned into, this is missing context, we're going to block you and your IP so that you can't ever go on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or anything else again. The Atlantic Council is a multi-governmental organization, international governmental organization that was set up to work with social media companies to help them set up guidelines for what can and can't be said on the internet. In other words, they created an ecosystem where only the big companies can thrive on social media, and then told them, hey, you want to keep this gravy train going? Do what we say. You want to just be the only handful of social media companies that can thrive in this environment? Do what we say. Oh, and by the way, it's about to get way worse. Because Frances Hogan, the whistleblower, who somehow got verified on Facebook the same day she created her account, because she's such a whistleblower, a downright Julian Assange she is, she has worked with Facebook and the government to begin the next phase, which is changing Section 230 to become so cost prohibitive to comply with that only Facebook and Twitter and Google and the rest of the large big tech companies can afford the cost of compliance, thereby ensuring that you aren't going to have MeWe's and Gabs and all these other different social media. Now, what I hope that leads to is blockchain-based social media, decentralized social media, off the books, possibly illegal social media. It may have to come to that, and it may come to that a lot sooner than y'all think. When Mark Zuckerberg goes, well, yes, I guess we could definitely see some modifications to the regulations, I guarantee you that that's going to make your internet experience much, much worse. Now, that's what I would say to the people who say, oh, it's just a private company. Oh, and when it comes to the mandates, if the federal government says you're going to get fined X amount every single day unless you require your employees to get vaccinated, and then you turn around and say all my employees need to get vaccinated, that's not a private action. That is a government coerced action. If someone holds a gun to my head and says, tell everyone in this crowd that they have to give you $100 that you then hand off to me, or I'm going to shoot you in front of everyone, and I say, hey folks, breaking news, I'm going to need $100 from each of you, and we can talk later about why. That wasn't me privately choosing to do, or I was choosing to do it with the consequence of my not doing it being my destruction. And that's the same case here. These aren't private actions. Now, another question that can be asked is, what do we do about it? Because that does force multiply for government. They're not having to rely on police, they're relying on private companies. Oh, incidentally, Texas, with their so-called abortion ban, is extending it now where they'll use snitches instead of the government. Now, the government will be the ultimate arbiter and enforcer, but they're going to use snitches. So here's how we fight that. It still takes those enforcers at the end of the day. Those snitches can snitch, but they're not the ones that show up to actually force you to do anything. These private companies can tell you you have to do it, but it's not them that ultimately forces you to comply with it, right? Let's talk specifically about the vaccine mandate thing. We're already seeing how a handful of pilots, high winds, refusing to do their job for a day or two completely shuts down air traffic in entire sections of the country. We already had a labor shortage thanks to the government playing red light, green light with the economy for the better part of a year and a half, and all the mess that's created in the labor pool and the supply chain. This is actually a really good time for strikes. This is actually a really good time for, if about, 3 to 5% of workers said, no, I'm not getting vaccinated, and the number's actually way higher. If enough of them say, no, I'm not going to get vaccinated, I guess you're going to have to fire me. Again, I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm broadly saying that if enough of people do that, those employers who will essentially be out of business will inevitably turn back to the Biden administration and say, this ain't going to work, Chief. we're not gonna be able to do this. We're gonna have some kind of exemptions and carve-outs, or we're not going to be able to operate. So even there, non-compliance works. It gets a little muckier and hairier, but the reality is it's still the same thing. If enough people simply say, no, I'm not going to do that, then that really gums up the whole thing. They rely on compliance. Compliance is the lubricant to this machine, and the more we refuse to say it, the more that machine gets gummed up. So, but no, it's not a private action. Social media is acting as an arm of the government in their censorship that they're doing. I mean, think about it for a second. If all other things being equal, if social media said on their own, you know what, I'm going to just start arbitrarily blocking and banning people for not complying with a certain political mindset, that's a terrible business choice to make. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it because they know that government is creating this ecosystem where only they can thrive in exchange for their doing that. This is a government action. They're just using a private company. If only there were a word for the merger of corporation and government to work together to oppress you. If only there were a term for that. If only someone like Benito Mussolini had come up with a term
Does it start with that?
to just describe the corporatist economic plank that uses that. I want to do the church lady thing. Was that, could it be fascism? But thank you for that question. It's not a private action, it's fascism. Yeah, it's fascism, bro. Any other questions? And if y'all want, whoever's in charge, if y'all want me to stop talking, yeah. Hey.
John, I'm running for Mayor 14 against AOC.
Yes.
I've listened for a long time to the Libertarian Party needs to be on the green movement. We need to talk about the environment.
Yeah.
Could you speak up, please?
We need to talk about the environment and pollution as a property rights issue and as a bodily autonomy issue. If someone is putting a pollutant into your body, they're violating your bodily autonomy. And here in New York, we just passed a constitutional amendment on Tuesday, giving the right to clean air and water. And I wonder what you think is the distinction between making an environmentalist argument from that new amendment versus doing it from a bodily autonomy and private property angle. My worry is that they're going to say, well, you all have a right to it, so that means you have a right to have it provided to you.
That's the problem. Yeah, anytime that the government says, hey, how'd you like a new right? Or a newly protected right, I tend to say, no thanks, I think we should handle it on our own. I think you should be less involved. You're the reason that I have a problem with that in the first place. Murray Rothbard actually talked about the property rights argument for pollution quite a while ago. All externalities ultimately are still within the property. Many people will say, well, your private property right construct doesn't really work once you start factoring externalities. Well, yeah, it does, because those externalities affect my property, so yeah, they do. In the case of pollution, if you can demonstrate that through malicious or negligent action, that you are causing damage to someone else's property in the form of actual damage to the water or the soil or the air, well, that's private property damage. You damage their property, their personal private property, their health, their body, and their property itself. So there is a private property argument to be made, and yeah, I mean, there's a bodily autonomy argument to be made there, but ultimately that just boils down to another property argument. Your body is your property. My fear, I shouldn't call it my fear, what's going to happen when government gets involved in this and says, well, yeah, you have the right to clean air. The right to clean air, when enforced by government, especially the New York government, is going to lead to them using that to basically crush the smaller competitors of larger and higher polluting companies, which is what all environmental regulations do. We should be talking about the environment a lot, because here you have the Democrats who have largely owned the environment, and yet they get the biggest donations from the biggest and most polluting companies. And their voting base knows that. But because everyone else goes, the environment's a hoax, that lets them own the environment. So if instead we said, yeah, so they tell you that the environment's important, and the environment is important, and the way that they deal with that is they have the large polluting corporations write and create a burdensome regulatory regime structure that they then pass and enforce, which makes it functionally and cost prohibitive and impossible for their smaller competitors to operate. So now there are only those larger and higher polluting companies left, and when they violate their own regulations, the first thing government does is try to cover it up, and then when if that doesn't work, then they give them a slap on the wrist fine. They set up a trust fund that we all pay for to pay off the damages that were caused by it, and then they basically clean it up at our expense, and no one learns anything other than the bigger companies learn that they can do whatever they want and we pay for it. That didn't help the environment. That was virtue signaling for politicians, and the actual action was worse pollution. And so our solution should be very simple. Get rid of the regulatory structure and simply stop indemnifying companies against being sued. If a company does so much damage to the environment and to the people that live in that environment that it can be demonstrable in court, let them get sued. And now the Democrats, and Republicans for that matter, will say, well, you can't do that. If they can be sued out of existence, then they'd all be broke. Good! If they're actually causing damage, let them get sued out of existence. More importantly, let them know that can happen. Because they will self-regulate far more than those regulations are in place right now. They'll do far more, not because they suddenly turn into angelic beings, but because they don't want to lose everything. I mean, it's the same argument we make with qualified immunity, right? If you hold bad actors accountable, they'll inherently be more accountable. Let's do that for everything. Not just cops should be able to be sued, and politicians should be able to be sued, not me, but the rest of them, and judges and prosecutors and CPS workers and family law workers, family court advocates, and everyone else. Like everyone that's working for government can get sued if they do bad actions. Let's extend that to the corporations that they keep giving indemnification to. There's your argument. There's your environmental argument. If I'm running against AOC, I go, why does your party keep protecting these mega polluting corporations from getting sued? And then why do you vote for the budgets that allow that? Since you care so much about the environment. That would be my angle. So, thank you.
Have you figured out how to pronounce Oniano?
Oniano.
I hope you can settle a question for me.
Sure.
Should every libertarian have a podcast?
Well, as a libertarian with 2 podcasts, there's too many. Stop doing it. No.
One more.
Just one. I mean, frankly, I think it is true that we are one libertarian podcast away from solving all of this. And the question is, which one? And that's up to you, America. No. So I assumed that everyone was like this. Like, well, I'm sure everyone wants to start a political podcast. No, it's us. It's us. We are very unique this way. It's actually rare for most people to want to start a political podcast, except for us. I don't know why that is. I'm sure really talented sociologists could really break that down. But again, as someone with 2 podcasts, which you should watch on the Money Waters Media Network, I think we might have, we may be close to saturation, but I wouldn't say, I'm not sure we're there yet though. I think and I say you, all of you, I think your podcast might be the one. And we'll never know until you start.
I don't know if I can ask you a second question.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So, libertarians, you just mentioned a lot about a solution to a lot of things is the courts and suing bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
What is the solution to juries looking at a sympathetic old lady or, poor person who doesn't have anything and seeing great big bad company who may not have really done much of anything wrong and saying, well, what's wrong with giving her $50 million?
Yeah.
What's the solution to that?
I'm not sure that there's a very good solution other than I think that long before it gets in front of a jury, there should be judges deciding if there's a real case there to be had. And this is, by the way, I think it's important to know there is no utopia. Every and as libertarians, we know this because we immediately, as soon as we're told a new idea, we start breaking down where all the problems are going to be. And that's good. We need people like that because that's how you come up with, that's how you advance and come up with new and better ideas, right? I think that the biggest challenge is going to be that. And the biggest, best way to deal with that is to have as informed a jury as possible and to make sure that there is a system in place to make sure that judges are saying, is there any proof of, or any reason to think that there might be a case for malicious behavior or negligence causing this to happen? By the courts. But here's the problem. To address that you just said, what the politicians have said is, well, that's why we have to protect them. Well, that's led to this. And I'll say, if I had to choose, if there were no way to try to fix that problem, and I had to choose between the occasional trillion-dollar corporation having to give $50 million to grandma and multi-trillion-dollar corporations using a regulatory regime to destroy all of their smaller competition, do whatever the hell they want to us, and then we pay for the damage that was just caused to us with interest, I'll take the grandma getting $50 million. That's not good, and that isn't what we should aspire to, and we should be looking to solutions for that. But I think that the fix to that problem has been a much worse problem that was created by it, which is the most powerful people among us running roughshod over us, fully aware of the fact that there's nothing we can do about it in any effective way. So that would be the challenge, and I think it takes having, the short answer is it's going to take judges that are being clear in determining whether or not this case. I think also another good way to do that would be either like a loser pays type system. And also I think that we should probably be having some stronger penalties for attorneys who should know better taking these cases to court in the first place. But again, that creates a series of problems that you could get really good attorneys to weaponize that to scare off smaller attorneys who are trying to sue them. So everything's going to have problems, but I would much rather the check and balance be there in the court system than just having this blanket, we protect our politically entrenched companies from any possible liability for anything they do wrong. So it's not a perfect system though. I'm being asked a question by a Canadian person, and then right after the Canadian person, yes, hi, hello.
Hi, Tasha.
Hi.
Happen to share the same last name.
Yes.
So my question to you is, what tactics and approach do you use now in convincing people to listen to liberty and spreading the message of liberty that you used to win my heart?
Wow. Well, I think the first thing was I did make it clear early on when we first started talking that anytime you wanted to applaud me, I would stop. And I would let you. Who just booed me? Was that you that booed?
No, but be honest.
What is the what? Yeah. So how is my how? I'm sorry. I was taken aback by your beauty.
Oh, yeah.
How would I apply what I did to win your heart to?
What approach and tactics do you use today that you used 14 years ago?
Okay, so number one, always make eye contact. And don't let it break, because she might look at someone else. I'm not sure. So I guess, not... So I think the problem is I don't want them to go out and try to, score with all the people they're talking to. So I'm trying to figure out, how to make a platonic version of that. So I think, broadly speaking, be kind, listen, ask questions, be gracious.
That never worked.
I think, again, I'm trying, because my goals with you were much different. And I'm trying to shoehorn that into this. No, I think well, how did I win your heart?
Oh, wow. You're reversing the question.
Yeah. What are you comfortable telling a crowd of people? No, I think the most important thing is being gracious and kind, and listening, and actually listening. I think we often listen to people waiting to say what we want to say to them. And I think especially where we're coming to them with something pretty intense, right? We're coming to them with a completely different way of looking at our society. In the case with my wife, I was trying to get her to marry a 6. That's a solid 6. A solid 6.
Keep telling yourself that.
A solid 6. A solid 6. By the way, incidentally, I used to look like that too, but she stopped aging. So that's not fair, because the whole black don't crack thing, that's really true. Ashkenazi Jew cracks a lot. So I looked like I was a beautiful man, and then like 15 years later, now I look like this, and she still looks like that. And that's not fair. It's not fair.
You just don't age.
What?
You don't age, it's just you.
Sure.
Everything's old now.
I am aging like milk. I'm aging here right now. So, you know, when you come to someone with something very intense and completely out of their Overton window, what is it Tom Woods calls it, the 3x5 index card of allowable opinion, it sounds insane. Meanwhile, what they believe is insane, but it sounds crazy to them. And the most important thing is you have to be looking at their cognitive defenses and finding ways to demonstrate by working with them on things you already agree on that you're a good actor. You're not some crazy person trying to sell them on some insanity. You're not, trying to get them to move to South America and drink the Kool-Aid. You're bringing them a way to set everyone free and to fix the problem we're facing. Because keep in mind, everyone that you were talking to deep down knows something is wrong.
Yes.
Remember who here's always been a libertarian their entire life? And I mean like a member of the party, always voted libertarian, never bought into exactly. No one, was that you?
Close.
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 Possible, we'll say one of us. And this is the creme de la creme of New York libertarians, dare I say, okay?
U.S.
Yes. No, but it's true. Across the country, it's the same thing. Maybe one or two are like, yes, I've always been a libertarian. And it's usually because their parents were libertarians. Okay? So here's the thing. Remember when you weren't a libertarian yet, or didn't know it, or however you want to word it, and something just seemed wrong? You're watching the news, you're listening, maybe you're listening to different podcasts, you're watching stuff on YouTube, or you're reading the news about whatever age you were. You're consuming media, and it just sounds wrong. You're hearing what the government's telling you, you're hearing what the corporate-approved media is telling you, and something is off. But everyone's saying the same thing. It's okay, you're allowed to acknowledge that I just talked about it. We're going to need to clean up, by the way. But something always just seemed off and wrong. But everyone was saying the same thing. By the way, there's a story about this. It's called The Emperor's New Clothes. Okay? At Plato's Cave, same thing. But Emperor's New Clothes, they said, what a beautiful cloak this man has, even though he was naked. And I know when I first heard that, I'm like, well, how could that be? Everyone's watching it and they're naked. I'm now an adult. I don't wonder that. That could happen now. It actually is happening on quite a few things. Everyone's saying, oh,
Biden.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. What a brilliant man Joe Biden is. And but this is happening. And if anyone speaks out, they're called crazy. When we speak out, we're considered crazy. But everyone there is sitting there going, I think that's a butt. I think that's his butt. I don't think something's wrong here. Everyone is thinking something is off, something is wrong here. When you meet them where they are on something you've already agreed with them on, you can start unthreading that. When you can start working on that until they go, wow, okay, that does make sense. And now you can actually take them on that journey, and then they might move to America and marry you. So that's... I know you had a question too, man. And I can't, nothing else here can break, so I should be good.
My name is Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
It's super nice. But I live in a
attorneys.
Yeah, so a large number of parcels of land have been horribly contaminated, but the companies are now out of business. They have been for a decade. Do you think that opening up business owners to liability for their businesses so that they could be gone after even after their business goes bankrupt, and or being able to go after the shareholders of the business if that business loses?
I think that if malicious behavior or negligence can be demonstrated, then yes. I don't like the idea of completely opening up all businesses to the potential, or the owners to the potential for liability that can come from it, because there are times that mistakes are made, and if a individual person made a mistake, there are often times that they wouldn't be held accountable for it. So I think at the very least, if malicious behavior or negligence caused it. I will say this, and I'll say this as someone that has owned LLCs and S-corps. The protection that comes from the original reason for a corporation was that it was a stick and carrot. It was, if you want to operate your business, you got to pay taxes. And it was a lot harder to make sure that companies were collecting taxes. So the best way they could do it is, well, you got to pay your taxes, but we're going to protect you from any liability for it. And so it is a government-created fiction. That is what a corporation is, well, if you want to operate a business, you got to comply with all of our laws, and you have to, submit and pay your taxes. But we're going to give you protection from it.
So, do you think that it's the government's job to clean up those sites that are horribly polluted and have no one to go after?
The government has positioned itself to be the only ones to do it. So the question becomes: are they good at it? They typically are not. If we're asking a libertarian utopia question, how would it be handled absent government? Absent government, it probably wouldn't have happened. There's a likelihood it wouldn't have happened, or it wouldn't have been as bad in the first place. But let's say it has already happened. Absent government, there would be a very low value to that land, and someone would want to buy it with the understanding, because the value would be.
No, I mean they're contaminated in the entire area. So
not just that actual property.
And these are in residential neighborhoods. There's no industrial districts.
Right. So it's residential neighborhoods that have been destroyed. Yeah, so again, I mean, this is the imperfection that comes from government, right? So now we're left with an imperfect solution, which probably is government having to clean that up. But that means taxpayer paying for it. So yeah, I think you find whoever was involved in that and you hold them as financially accountable as possible. But that creates the problems of figuring out where their money is, because they're using these corporate fictions to protect their liability and their income. Again, this is a problem created by government, because absent people trying to create a tax shield and liability shield, they wouldn't have been able to do that, and they'd be held accountable for what they did. So in the meantime, now all that's been done, it's probably going to end up being the taxpayer that pays for it. And that sucks, but that's government for you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Juan Ayala.
Hi, Juan.
I just recently ran for office for Alderman,
Okay.
City Council. Unfortunately, I came up short, but it's emboldened me now to be even more active locally. And I'm not going away. I'm definitely not going away. And I heard you mention earlier about you got the power, and I wanted to know if you could maybe speak a little bit more on that, or tips that I can do. Because, by the way, during my campaign, I actually had people started doing these. I got inspired by Larry Sharp to do these little podcasts on the consoles, and people loved them. So I got text like, "I hope you still continue doing that." I went, "Well, I'm not really a podcaster, but apparently since I'm libertarian, I have to now."
You have to. Yours could be the podcast that fixes all of this.
Well, exactly. So I just wanted to get a little more suggestions. What else I can do locally? And by the way, I'm married to a beautiful black woman, and she still looks like 18. She still gets ID. You're absolutely right.
She gets ID. She's older than me.
I can't take her out. I think I'm taking a child to a bar. So
I haven't been ID. Thank you, Juan, for talking about our shared pain. I haven't been ID'd since 2007. Which, granted, I was of age, but she still gets carded. There was a place, it was a couple years ago, they wouldn't let her in. And she thought it was hilarious. And they're like, sure, you can come in. And I'm like, this is my wife who's older than me. No, she definitely can't come in. No, on the campaign trail, they wouldn't let her buy a non-alcoholic drink because they didn't believe she was 21. And so I said, well, can I just buy it? And they said, no, sir, we have laws against people of age buying things for underage people. I said, she's older than me. Anyway, since that was the root of your question. I felt like I'd address the most important part first. So incidentally, everything that I'm about to tell you, You Are the Power is going to make easier and programize and systematize it so it can actually be easier. But how can you be the most effective in your community? First of all, you need to understand, and I'm sure you've figured this out, you ran for alderman, most people don't care about your ideas. They don't care about your philosophy. They care about your solutions, but especially at a local level, what they actually care the most about is, do I know you? Do I have any reason that I should think that I or anyone else should have heard of you? Do I have any reason to think that you care about me and my community? And then, what is your solution? But only after, do I even know you? And do I have any reason to think that you are going to do anything for this community, that you care about this community? And then we as Libertarians show up and we go, yes, I'd love to answer your question about my philosophy. And it doesn't connect, because that's not what they asked. So the most important thing you can do is be as involved as possible in your community. And that means the most, things that are not political. Being involved in things like Toys for Tots, if you have that in your area. Being involved in any kind of park cleanups. Or being a leader in park cleanups. You got a local Libertarian affiliate, they're looking for stuff to do? Great. Park cleanup, road cleanup, sponsoring a road. I know, because we love sponsoring roads, right? You put it right there, you call it Biden Roads sponsorship. All of these things are ways that you show that you're involved with the community. Either getting involved with other people's efforts to do this, or doing your own, or both. Getting involved in non-political ways, okay? And showing up with your Juan Ayala, right?
Yes.
Juan Ayala for whatever, or for whatever you were running for. Or, such and such Libertarian Party, whatever your local affiliate is. Or the Libertarian Party of New York, or just the Libertarian shirt. And not talk about libertarianism, just show up and do it. And if someone goes, hey, what's that? Oh, well, yeah, this is my party, and here's what we believe in, blah, blah, blah. But, I'm just here to help. Okay? The more that you do that, the more that you're out there and involved in your community. So that's the non-political, just feel-good community engagement stuff you can do. Here's the political stuff you can do. Find every single group in your area, whatever your constituency is that you're thinking of running in, or just even in your local area, that already has that common cause with you, like we were talking about. Anti-lockdown groups, criminal justice reform groups, pot legalization groups. There's a big group with psychedelic decriminalization, sex work decriminalization groups, anti-war groups, Second Amendment groups. You have so many people that we have common cause with. It may just be that one thing, but you can demonstrate yourself as someone who is willing to show up and do the work and to be a leader in that. And when you do that, you are building goodwill with the very people you will need when it's time to run for something. But you have to do that first. If you aren't already a known commodity in your area, you have to become one. The people that I know who have been the best, most successful at running for office as Libertarians in competitive races, where they were actually running against better funded candidates, sometimes in a three-way race with a Republican and a Democrat and them, and both the Republican and Democrat had more money. Everyone there knew them. Everyone there had a connection with them. Everyone there associated them, not with the Libertarian Party, but with someone who cared about their community. And when you do that, you demonstrate yourself as a known commodity, a leader, someone they trust, someone that they want to have these solutions for their community. Then you can talk to them about your plans and your solution. And then later on, you can have conversations about what you believe as a Libertarian. But we lead with belief. We lead with ideas. Most people aren't like that. Most people want to know who you are, your personality, whether they can trust you, whether they think they can trust you. Look at the average politician. The average politician is a facade of trustworthiness and care and concern and friendliness and all of that. And the reason that they're so bereft of any ideas is because they don't have to have ideas. Most voters don't care about that. They care about if they think they can trust you. And unfortunately, most voters are actually easy to fool on that. If you actually care about them, it's going to be easy. So just demonstrate you care. Get involved in your local community as much as you are. And again, I'm not assuming you're not already. I'm just saying here are the things you can do. Get involved with common groups that are already working on your goals and work with them on it. Help grow your local affiliate through that, and yeah, that's how you win. That's how we win. So, hey, Sean.
You had mentioned kindness, and I think I've seen you say something about that online as well. Is that going to be part of your activist website, with some guidelines for people to talk in kind ways about things rather than angry activists?
Yes. So I think it is important when you are talking with people, Sean, and when they are dismissing our ideas, it's important to remember why they're doing it. It's because they're a bunch of road-cut, mid-wit bootlickers. And you should tell them that. They're possibly feds. They're definitely idiots. And you should tell them that on Facebook every opportunity you get. No, I think it's important to remember what brought you here. I actually use 3 filters, and yes, this is going to be one of the resources in You Are the Power, is how to effectively and empathetically communicate with people, especially when they're not doing it back. Because a lot of times people are like, yeah, but what if they're not being nice back to me? No, that's actually part of empathy, is they don't have to be nice to you. I use 3 filters. When I'm talking, and the rare time that I choose to actually debate someone on social media, which is exceedingly and increasingly rare, I use 3 filters that work for me. And if these 3 filters don't work, I stop them. I disengage. I say, hey, great point, agree to disagree, have a great day, and I mute them and let them seethe. Here are the 3 filters I use. Number 1, imagine you're talking to someone you really care about, like the person you love and care about the most. Okay, you're talking with Gammy about politics, and Gammy doesn't think that we should let them in because they're stealing our jobs or whatever. And how would you talk to her? Or how would you talk to someone that you care the most about? Pretend you're talking to that person. Here's another one I use. Pretend that you're talking to every single person on earth is seeing and hearing what you're saying right in that moment. Everyone that you care about, strangers, the media, everyone is watching this. Because they are. On social media, you can put a comment out, and especially on a public page, and it's there forever. Even if you delete it, someone might screenshot it. Okay? It's out there forever. So pretend everyone's watching. What would you want to see? What would you want them to see of what you're saying? What would you want them to see from you? And then the last one I use is pretend you're talking to yourself before you were a libertarian. I was a miserable neocon. Scott Cohen would come up here and beat me to death with a stick back like 20 years ago. As passionately and as strongly as I advocate now for liberty, is as strongly, and thankfully I wasn't nearly as effective. I was a child back then, and I was on drugs. But I was every bit as passionate. It was probably the drugs that made me a neocon. But I was every bit as passionate about being a neocon, about bombing people for peace and spreading democracy through puppet regimes and all that nonsense. I remember that guy because I still meant just as well as I do now. And I try to remember that guy. What would neocon Spike needed to have heard in that moment? Because me being called a racist and a warmonger certainly wasn't it. It was people talking to me from the things that I was concerned about and saying, it was Matt Kibbe's FreedomWorks emails saying, hey, if you want government to be smaller, how is this going to make that happen? If you want government less involved in your life, how is them spying on you going to do that? If you want us to have more trade with the rest of the world, how is making them all hate you going to do that? And it took that to bring me off. So I use those 3 filters. Imagine you're talking to someone you care the most about. Imagine every single person is watching it. And if that doesn't work, imagine you're talking to yourself back before you reached, in this moment, your perfect level of understanding of all things. With no room to grow whatsoever, of course. You now know everything, and there's no way possible anyone could ever possibly tell you anything new, of course. But imagine that you talked to yourself right before that. What would that person want to hear? And if those 3 things can't stop you from reflecting back the jerk level attitude that you're getting from them, just disengage. And yes, we will be talking about that a lot, because libertarians are good at many things. Sometimes social cues are not the best of them. And
You think?
yeah, I do think, unfortunately. And there are many reasons for that, and I don't want to get into that. But the bottom line is that we definitely need to talk more about kindness, and we definitely need to talk more about being the same people on the internet that we often are in person. because most of us tend to be a lot kinder in person than we are on the internet. So yeah, we definitely will be talking about that, Sean. Thank you.
We are done.
I am done. Thank you. My wife has told me I'm done. Oh, Scott Horton. I'm sorry, honey. Scott Horton.
Okay, last question.
Would you please tell the people that I got a pile of books out there that I want to check?
Enough already is the book that you need for this holiday season. I know you were thinking, what can I get Gammy for Christmas? Well, folks, what if I told you that there was a tome, a downright epic, that explains from A to Z exactly how we got in the mess that we are in foreign policy. All those times that Gammy has asked you, I wonder why we're still at war. And you said, well, Gammy, it's very complicated, but maybe I can explain it to you later. Now you don't have to do that. You don't even have to have that conversation with Gammy. Scott will have it with Gammy for you. If you go out there, it's called Enough Already. It's $20? $20, and he'll sign it for the same price. $20, and he'll sign it, and he'll say, and you can now go to Gammy and say, Gammy, Scott Horton, a friend of mine, has written this book for you. Happy holidays, I love you. So go out there and buy Scott Horton's book. Enough Already, $20, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to end by saying this. We often. This is a great turnout for a group like this, for an event like this, but we often will come to like local affiliate meetings and there's like 5 of us there, 3 of us there, and it can feel hopeless, right? We'll get there and we're like, wow, we are going up against a multi-trillion-dollar machine that has every lever of power of government. They control the media, they control our banking system, they control everything, and there's like 6 of us here. How could we ever possibly win? How could we possibly ever accomplish anything? Every major revolution and social movement that has ever happened anywhere on the planet ever has always started with a group of people that could fit at this table right here. Sometimes just a family, sometimes just a person. And that group or that family or that person, they knew the odds that were against them and they didn't care. They didn't care how outmanned, how outgunned, how outspent they were. They didn't care how much danger they were in because they knew that the only alternative to fighting until they won was to just shrug their shoulders and say, I guess this is how it's going to be. That was unacceptable to them. That was unacceptable to the people in Luke Zell's living room 50 years ago. That is unacceptable to you, and that's why you're here. Liberty is going to win because we have the best way forward. And when we win, when we set this country and this planet free, it's going to be because of you. People are going to talk about the remnant. The people who, when all hope seemed lost, simply fought because they weren't going to give up, because we were just that stubborn that we weren't going to go along with it. We are going to win, and I am grateful to be surrounded here and in every other state I visited with warriors for liberty. We are the grassroots army for human liberty, and we are not looking to reform things. We are looking for nothing short of a revolution. That's what I'm here for. Now, who's with me? Sorry for breaking your cup. I apologize.
A true story of freedom. Tasha Cohen, coming from Canada with nothing but the clothes on her back, emigrating this country to find freedom. We thank her today for bringing her husband. We are in break. Thank you, Spike, seriously, very, very much. We're so glad you can come here.
She had more money than me when she came here.
We're on break. We're going to extend the break until 2:15 just because Spike couldn't stop talking. So we'll go to 2:15 and we'll reconvene then. Thank you.